Hello friends, today in this video, I want to talk about 10 modalities that can really help you as you're working through complex trauma. Now, in my last video, I talked about how talk therapy alone is not enough to work through trauma. And just to kind of normalize that and make sense of that, if you think about somebody that's trying to get into shape physically, and they're like, exercise alone is not what's going to help you to get your body to how you want it to be. Well, obviously, you need exercise, right? But exercise alone isn't enough because if you're exercising and exercising, but your diet is off, then you're not going to get to where you want to be physically. The reverse is true as well. If you're eating amazing, but you have no exercise in place, you're not working your muscles, you're not doing anything to get your body toned, you may not be overweight, but you're not going to be toned in the way you may want either. So neither one alone is enough. Well, it's the same thing with working through complex trauma. Talk therapy obviously is important because you need to make sense of what happened. You need to understand what happened. You need to kind of peel back the layers of the trauma in a way that your brain can understand it. That's a part of it. But understanding and logic alone isn't enough. And as I mentioned in my last video, brought out my brain for part 2 of this video, of this series, information and learning is in your neocortex. But trauma is in the limbic network, which is underneath. And information doesn't tend to flow down, it flows up. That's why when you're having a reaction to something, like you're having an emotional trigger or your anxiety, your fight or flight has kicked on, it's kicked on here. Logically, you may know you're totally safe. Logically, you know you're safe, but can you convince that piece of you that you are? No. Has anyone struggled with an emotional flashback where you know you're fine, but your body's acting like it's not? Well, the reason has to do with where our language and information is stored and where our trauma is stored in the body and in the brain. So my main point is not to stop one or the other, but to combine them. You really need to find ways to combine if you really want to work through all of the side effects of complex PTSD. I'm not a believer that somebody with complex PTSD has to suffer their whole life. But I am a believer that you have to find modalities that work, and it's rarely, like I mentioned in the last video, at the end of that video, it is rarely one modality that is enough. It's usually that we tend to have to combine and add different modalities that resonate with us and continue them long enough so that we can work through the complex trauma. That being said, I hope that makes sense. Okay, that being said, I wanted to talk about 10 modalities that really work when you combine the mind and the body. Okay, it's not enough to have one or the other. Just an example of that. I have a client who at one time was doing trauma release breathwork sessions, which is one of the things on my list that I'm going to mention to help with trauma. God, itchy eye. What the heck? How does that happen? So she was doing trauma release breathwork sessions, but she didn't have the understanding as to why. There was no talk involved. It was just she would go to her therapist, lay on the couch, do the breathwork session, and then that was it. And she didn't get it. And so eventually she stopped. Okay, so that modality alone, without the understanding, without knowing what she could do cognitively, wasn't helpful. It wasn't until she started doing the breath work again with cognitive learning that it was able to have a benefit. Okay, so that being said, some of these I'm familiar with, some of these I've done, some of these I do with my coaching clients, and some of these are offered in the Thriver School of Transformation, but some of them I've never done before. But I wanted to bring out 10 different modalities. Now, I'm not endorsing any one more than the other, but what I am wanting to encourage you to do is find modalities that resonate with you, that help you. Okay, so I literally just thought of two more and just jotted them down because I want to mention as many as possible. And I know this is not an all-inclusive list. So if there are some modalities that have been helpful for you that I didn't list here, please put them in the comment section below because maybe somebody can look up that information and it can resonate with them and it can be very helpful for them. Okay, so the first one that I wanted to mention was transcranial magnetic stimulation. I've never done that. I have a friend that's trained in it. You can look that up. I don't have a lot of experience in that. I've never had it done. The person that I would have it done by, the person that talked to me about it, lives too far from me, and I haven't found anyone near me. But that is something that was developed and is helpful with things like PTSD, as well as so many other things. So again, you can look that up. It's transcranial magnetic stimulation. The next thing along those lines is neurofeedback. So neurofeedback, I did for a few months, and the reason why I feel awesome it's an awesome addition to anyone that's working through trauma is because trauma changes the brain. So your amygdala, your limbic network, areas in that section enlarge through overuse. And the hippocampus, which helps us with our thinking, our decision making, our memory, actually shrinks because of trauma. So, neurofeedback is really helpful in working with the brain and really getting it to work optimally. Now, neurofeedback basically, the one that I did was you're literally watching TV, you have things hooked up to your head, and you're watching TV, and every now and then the screen does something. And the purpose of it is that you may not notice anything on a logical level, but your brain starts noticing where it's off, where it's performing in a way that it shouldn't, or it's stimulated to operate in a way that it should, but it's not. And so by seeing it on the screen, how it's off, it autocorrects. Kind of like when we look in the mirror, right? If I have a piece of salad in the middle of my teeth, I'm going to autocorrect and remove it. Well, the brain starts seeing itself in neurofeedback. It's like, oh, this is what I should be doing. And it starts, thanks to neuroplasticity, it starts to kind of work on where it is off. The third thing, the third modality that's helpful along the lines, and they're kind of running into each other in a similar way, but the next one that I put down is biofeedback. Biofeedback is very similar to neurofeedback in the sense that a biofeedback scan, it will take a picture of your body field, okay? And because they've mapped what a healthy body field looks like, right? So they have the resonance of a healthy body field, biofeedback, they take a picture of where your body field is now, and it can compare and see what areas of your body are off. Now, the amazing thing about biofeedback is that it's not just looking at where your body is physically off. Trauma gets stored in our tissues, it gets stored on a cellular level. And sometimes it's that stuck trauma and that stuck energy in areas of the body that start showing up as physical problems later on. The problem is if you're taking vitamins or if you're taking medication on a chemical level to help those areas of your body, but the indent of trauma is in your body field, you can never get to the root cause. And so biofeedback really helps you to get to the root of where trauma is in your body, and it helps you to correct your body field, which then can help you emotionally as well as physically. The number 4 is somatic experiencing. This is a program by Peter Levine. What is awesome about somatic experiencing and why I feel it's so beneficial for trauma recovery. And again, all of these this is my opinion. This whole video is my opinion. So if somebody feels differently, then that's completely normal and that's okay. All right. So I just wanted to highlight that. But the reason I feel somatic experiencing is so powerful with trauma is because, like in part 1 of the series, I mentioned how sometimes talking about trauma, talking about what you went through can wake up areas in your limbic network. That unprocessed trauma, which is stuck in pieces in that area of your brain, can wake up and now you're feeling it in your body. So it can feel really uncomfortable. Well, somatic experiencing is about inviting the body in the session. And so as you're talking about it using the cognitive and the mind, somatic experiencing helps you to also regulate your nervous system as you're doing the session. And in essence, what it does is it trains your nervous system to be in that window of tolerance where you can handle things, your sympathetic nervous system can kick on, but it stays in a level that's comfortable. Trauma with your nervous system flings it way up, slams it down, way up, slams it down. There's no flow. And so somatic experiencing brings the words and the nervous system together, super, super powerful. Number 5 is trauma release breath work. Now, in part 1 of this series, I mentioned that information flows up and not down. And that the only time it flows down is if it first had information that was flowing up. Okay, so what does that have to do with trauma release breathwork? Well, in a trauma release breathwork session, which is an intense breathwork session, it's not like a meditative, relaxing session. This is an intense breathwork session. What we do is we breathe in such a way that the theory behind it is that it calms the default mode network, which is up here in your neocortex. Okay, it calms the thinking so we get out of our way, and then unprocessed trauma that we can't get to normally with words can come up. So in trauma release breathwork sessions, there have been people that have had memories come up that they hadn't thought of in a long time. Realizations as to why they're afraid or why they feel certain things, why they're triggered about certain things have come up because the memories that were fragmented and stored in the limbic network came up and they were able to add information and process it. Number 6 is EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I've never done EMDR, but I've had a lot of clients tell me that it's really, really helpful. And the way I see it is the reason it's so powerful is because it does that. It combines the body and the mind together. What I mean by that is as you're talking about trauma, the therapist will be moving either their finger or whatever they're using to have your eyes follow from left to right as you're talking about it. And the purpose is that when you're in a trauma response, you wind up in a half brain state. Your emotional brain usually kicks on, your left brain, your logical brain checks out. In a brain scan, they have seen it, the right side lit up and the left side dark as night during a flashback. Okay, so when you're moving your eyes back and forth talking about trauma, you are activating both sides of the brain. And so when we have both sides of our brain activated, we can work through trauma. But if we are super activated in the emotional parts of our brain, the logical part isn't on, we're stuck in this, we can't work through trauma in that state. We can't heal trauma at that level of activation. We need the logical mind, the left brain online so that it can work through trauma together. So EMDR is really helpful with that. Something similar is brain spotting. So with brain spotting, it's again, the practitioner is using their finger or a pen or whatever they're using for you to track. And what they want you to do is when it feels uncomfortable, they'll have you pause wherever you start to feel something in the direction you're looking. And from that spot, you continue talking. 8 is EFT, emotional freedom technique. So trauma tends to couple things together. And it tends to couple things together that shouldn't be together. And it tends to uncouple things that should be together. For example, if somebody is in the freeze state or they've been in the freeze state for a long time, one of the things that you might notice as a coach is that somebody in a freeze state will tend to talk about what happened and maybe laugh or make a joke or smile. It's like the emotion with what they're talking about is uncoupled. What really should be coupled together is what happened and anger or pain, but there's a disconnect. Okay. Things that are coupled together. Let's say every time you were happy and feeling good, you were shamed by a parent. Now happiness gets coupled with danger. So those are things that take place in your nervous system and in your limbic network. They're not things that logically you can just say, oh, those things don't belong together with talk therapy and say that that doesn't belong together, it doesn't make sense. So therefore you're fine because you just learned that. We can get it cognitively. It can make sense. And we do have to know that. We do have to talk about that. But then we have to find the modalities that help our body to be convinced of that. And EFT is really awesome when it comes to that because what we do, and by the way, we do this on Fridays, every other Friday in the Thriver School of Transformation. We have an EFT session and we bring up something that's coupled together, a trigger, something that we're struggling with. We allow it to come up in the body. And then we tap on the endpoints of our meridians, which is our energy body, and that retrains the amygdala. So let's say happiness causes you to feel triggered. That means your amygdala is saying danger, danger, happiness, danger. But when we're tapping, we're basically telling the amygdala, happiness, no, you can calm down. This is good. This is a wonderful thing. And we're retraining the alarm system of the brain, and we are uncoupling things that shouldn't be coupled together, or fascia rolling. Now, I haven't done this yet, but I've been wanting to. I don't really have body pains, but this is a really awesome modality for people that tend to hold a lot of pain in their body and no one understands why. Emotional trauma can often show up in physical pains that don't make sense. And the reason is because the memory of the trauma is stored in the fascia, which is the connective tissue. It's stored, trauma is stored on a cellular level. Trauma is something that's happening. It's too fast, it's too much, it's too soon for the nervous system to process. So it kind of malfunctions, so to speak. So what's happening is that whatever's happening is so overwhelming that before the brain can really process it, the memory of what's happening can be stored in your cells. But what happens when these memories are stored in your cells, right, especially in areas like your fascia, headaches, back pain, neck pain, numbness, tingling, and even it can even affect your posture. Again, talking about those pains isn't going to make it better, but fascia rolling is an amazing way to not just help the body feel better, but to release the trauma that's stuck in areas of the body. I've had people tell me that when they've done fascia rolling, they had memories come up that they didn't even know were there. Some were even really young memories because the body stores memories on a cellular level in different areas of the body. So again, this isn't something I'm super familiar with, but it is something that I want to try at some point. I thought it is definitely on my list of things that I want to do. Number 10 is mindfulness training. Learning how to do mindful meditation, as well as learning how to live mindfully present is something that's really powerful for people that are wanting to work through complex trauma. And then as we were going, and I remembered two more that I almost forgot. Number 11 is Psych K. Okay, Psych K is certain brain postures that the practitioner will put you in that can help you to work through a belief that you're struggling with. So for example, on my website, I interviewed a woman that was doing Psych sessions with me who was battling being overweight. And she would get to a certain place on her journey and sabotage it, certain place and sabotage it. Thanks to Psych, she was able to completely break out of that subconscious pattern. And she went on to become a Psych practitioner herself. So shout out to you if you're watching my videos still. But anyone that is in the process of healing and finds themselves moving forward and back, Psych is a definite modality that is super powerful to help you to get your subconscious and your conscious mind working together. And then the last one that I put was releasing trapped emotions. Some people do it with magnets. Some people can do it with muscle testing, kinesiology. But being able to release trapped emotions is so helpful on the healing journey as well. So, bottom line, those are 12 modalities. Am I saying go out and do them all? No. But pick two or three that resonate with you, that as you're hearing them, you're like, wow, that That sounds like something that is for me. And then start trying to incorporate them on your journey. Okay. It's not about leaving talk therapy. It's not about a competition between talk therapy and somatic modalities. It's about learning to use them to complement each other and to find the modalities that work for you. What works for you may not work for someone else, and that's okay. So I hope this cleared up any confusion as to my first video, and I hope this gives you a bunch of options that you can start looking into to really continue to deepen your recovery journey.